Okay, so before we get started, spoiler alert, today's episode is going to make a monkey out of AI art, and I mean that quite literally. But first, let's talk about something else, internet memes, and more specifically, who owns them. So you may have seen this running away balloon comic in the form of a meme where a smiling gray cartoon character is chasing after a yellow ball labeled opportunities. But then in the next panel, we see he's being held back by a similarly kind-looking pink blob labeled shyness. It's a cute, resonant comic created by Elmer Saflor, also known as Super Elmer, a Philippines-based artist who says it came from a deeply personal place and he's happy that it's found traction as a popular internet meme, where it's being distributed freely and non-commercially among netizens. But what he's not happy about is the potential for AI companies selling products to digital advertisers to use his comic in a manner that allows paid users to receive copies or derivative works generated from his art. He's suing one such company, Memes Apps, that operates content creation platforms Memes.ai and Memes AI Studio, in the hopes of producing evidence during discovery that his rights have been infringed. Now, this is messy stuff because the problem rests in copyright. There's no question that Super Elmer owns the original work. Memes are considered fair use, but derivative works that aren't parody or substantially different could be infringing on his copyright to the original. The problem here is twofold. First of all, is AI-generated content that uses a meme and its training data creating a derivative work? That hasn't been definitively decided yet in US courts, let alone elsewhere in the world, and so the interpretation has been if an AI program creates something distinct and then a human being improves on it, that improved work is copyrightable as its own work. But again, this ignores the fact that AI is not actually creating something new, but rather is interpreting prompts and referencing training data to create work that's based on things that are probably copywritten. The other problem is whether or not a meme itself is copyrightable, and this is a huge problem that did receive a decision in 2024 that pretty much said, yes, it is. In 2024, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals upheld a jury verdict about the Success Kid meme, which features an 11-month boy named Sammy pumping his fist while he's standing on the beach. The photo itself is owned by Sammy's mother, Lainey Grenier, and while it's been one of the most popular and recognizable memes on the internet for the last 15 years, the court case found that using this meme in advertising, and it was in this case political ads for former Representative Steve King in Iowa, is not fair use. And according to an article you can read in the show notes from the website Plagiarism Today, this actually helped to establish a precedent that non-commercial use of memes featuring photos or creative content is okay, but commercial use without permission or license from the copyright holder is not. Transform works may be protected if they're clearly distinct from the original creation, but with a meme, it's pretty hard to transform the original content without losing any recognizable meaning. Now, look, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a marketer. And I know it's different to find out where the line is these days, especially with AI tools, but I think it's a good idea for us to take a quick look at copyright regulations and guidelines for AI-created content, and to talk about how advertisers can use AI content in their business. I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this is the Marketing Gateway. So the issue of whether or not AI can be granted copyright actually goes a bit further back than you might realize, and it doesn't involve machines at all, but rather monkeys. Basically, the story is that a British wildlife photographer named David J. Slater allowed some Indonesian macaques to use his camera to take selfies that he licensed for publication through a news service in 2011. Several news organizations carried the story, and a volunteer editor at Wikimedia Commons, which is the media hosting site of Wikipedia, uploaded 2 selfie pictures that had been published via the news publication The Daily Mail. Though Wikimedia Commons doesn't allow content that's copyrighted to be uploaded without a free content license, or because it's in the public domain, the editor's argument was that these pictures weren't taken by a human and therefore couldn't be copyrighted. This led to a lengthy legal fight between Slater and Wikimedia Commons, as well as the website TechDirt, which also published the pictures as public domain media and challenged his copyright claim. The United States Copyright Office published an opinion in 2014 saying that works created by humans were the only ones eligible for copyright, and works created by animals, nature, plants, or machines with no human intervention were not. They were specific in this statement, too, that monkeys are not eligible for copyright. Then things got really weird. Slater self-published these photographs in a book called Wildlife Personalities in 2015, and PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, filed a lawsuit against him for violating the monkey's copyright. They named the monkey Naruto, and thus the case Naruto versus David Slater appeared before the United States courts, first in district court in 2016, and then on appeal in 2017 in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. In both circumstances, the courts determined that animals cannot legally hold copyright. The courts also basically said PETA was wasting their time with a frivolous lawsuit and suggested they were doing this more as a publicity stunt than considering it a serious case. And what can I say? PETA is great at figuring out how to capitalize on controversy. But it definitely made the case more public and, as we're about to see, established a surprisingly important precedent. Slater's also said the years of drama took a toll on his health and career and also impacted his original kind-hearted intention of bringing attention to the plight of the Celebes-crested macaques in Indonesia, which are now known colloquially as the selfie monkeys. Apparently some good came out of this too. The monkeys now attract tourists who want selfies with them, and that's been a net positive for the locals and the monkeys. He did get a movie deal out of all this, which I don't think has ever moved forward, but he also has since found his name being mentioned whenever people talk about whether or not works produced by generative AI are copyrightable. He'll forever be a footnote in the broader story of man versus AI, and I hope he can find a way to capitalize on that because he is an amazing photographer. I've actually included a link to his online gallery if you want to see it, and there's some really gorgeous stuff there. But all of this goes to show that life is very weird and you never know what twists and turns are ahead for your personal legacy. I want to add that I personally have a lot of sympathy for David Slater because he put a lot of work into setting up those photographs, and the legal distinction for him was which organism pushed the button. For AI, it's a little different because AI platforms are not autonomously creating selfies of their internal circuit boards. They're being prompted by humans, referencing training data sourced from potentially billions of individual human creations, and then creating output using probabilistic models. It's not the same thing as befriending a macaque and getting it to press a button to take a selfie during a photo shoot session. But Slater's situation does set a precedent that if a work is not specifically created by a human, it's not copyrightable. The only way it's copyrightable is if a human being takes that creation and modifies it. Yet, this is also a dicey situation because the AI training data is probably already infringing on copyright. It's going to take years for courts to decide if any of this is fair use or not. And the human modifications that are required are sort of nebulous as well. Can an AI-generated image become human-authored and copyrightable if someone crops it and slaps a logo or some text over it? Well, presently, the interpretation is that the image itself is not copyrightable, but the rest of the elements are. But, any court case could change that. And AI video or music could even be more problematic if courts decide that human editors have to do a certain amount of editing or modification to be able to claim a work is authored by them and not the AI program. I imagine this will all probably get decided when an AI-produced film or music track is up for an award somewhere, but we really don't know where any of this is heading until that happens. So one case that looked like it might get a ruling from the Supreme Court was Thaler versus Perlmutter, a case with a curious connection to St. Louis. Well, St. Charles, actually, but the Thaler in that case is Dr. Stephen Thaler, an inventor and scientist who can only be described as an extremely outside-of-the-box thinker. On his own website, he takes credit for using neural networks for all sorts of applications during the last few decades, including near-death experiences, mental illness, and creativity. He developed his own AI system called DABUS, or Device for the Autonomous Bootstrapping of Unified Science, and he's challenged the legal system by attempting to file for intellectual property ownership by DABUS, specifically for 2 patents and the copyright to a digital painting at the center of the Thaler versus Perlmutter case called A Recent Entrance to Paradise. Dr. Thaler appealed his case all the way up to the Supreme Court, but they decided not to hear it and affirmed the unanimous ruling of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia that AI cannot be granted copyright because it's not human. Other court cases like Allen versus Perlmutter have challenged whether images created by Midjourney can be copyrighted due to the fact that they require extensive prompting. The US Copyright Office has said that the image itself is not copyrightable, but that a book featuring the images could itself be copyrighted even if the images themselves are not protected. A graphic novel called Zarya of the Dawn also posed a challenge when it was registered with the US Copyright Office in 2022, but the author didn't disclose that the artwork was created by Midjourney. Once that detail was discovered, the copyright was revoked in 2023, and the Copyright Office determined that the layout, text, and other human-authored components were protected, but the artwork itself was not. All of this creates a potentially risky situation for using AI art in advertising because it means that copyright protects some of the work, but not any of it that's probably created by an AI platform and not a human. If you run an ad and someone wants to duplicate it but use their own brand instead of yours, there are few legal mechanisms to stop them from doing so. And this could be really problematic if a brand wanted to launch a new product and fly-by-night copycats decided to launch similar products with similar branding and then use generative AI to copy the original brand's campaign. Proving they violated copyright could be difficult if AI was used at any point in the process, and they might also be able to make a legal claim that their similar work is not copyright infringing since it was authored by a machine and not a human. Another major problem could be if two very competitive brands started running similar ads to target the same audiences, and it turned out that the AI tools they used produced similar output from different human prompts. Can the brands challenge one another for infringing on copyright? Well, probably not successfully under the current rules, and there'd be very little legal protection to stop it from ever happening again. And then there's the issue of liability. Let's say that someone like the comic artist Super Elmer is successful in suing an AI platform that generates content used for ads and is able to find them liable for damages. Well, isn't it logical to think that the next battle will be to go after advertisers who use the platform in a manner that infringed on copywritten content by prompting the platform to create media that looks like something that already exists? At the very least, there'll probably be a wave of settlements to cover the potential for liability. And you know what? That could be costly. So, you know what I'm going to say here, right? Advertisers need to be really wary about using AI because the rules and guardrails aren't in place yet. And you know, my personal advice, at least for now, is to avoid AI entirely until the legal protections become clearer. But if you must use it, use AI to help speed up development and then use traditional human-driven production on all of the ad if possible, or on enough of the ad to be able to assert copyright on most of the elements. But you know, I've heard arguments for the other side, and we have a really great AI production studio here in St. Louis called Screenburn that has really been on the other side of this issue. With AI, it's possible to shorten production from weeks to hours and to shrink production budgets from 6 or 7 figures down to 4 or 5. This is definitely a siren's call to creative agencies and advertising buyers who are trying to do more with less. And the temptation to use these tools to respond to the market faster, cheaper, and better is going to be stronger than the desire for caution for those who like to move fast. And the progress that these tools allow for is incredible. So just in the last decade, without AI, we've watched digital video ads for smaller clients move from glorified slideshows to fully produced commercials. And that's only possible because technology has made it cheaper and easier to produce that sort of content. With AI, it is even cheaper and easier still. With just a few source photos, an AI model can create an authentic-looking image or video featuring a business owner or spokesperson, and it's not hard to replicate their voice from a few audio clips either. With AI production, anybody can be a superhero or ride around on a dinosaur or scale a building like King Kong or be a sports hero. In fact, I just mentioned that studio. I've seen them produce that sort of work for law offices, and they're proud of it. And is it perfect? No way. But if the ad's going up on the web or running for a short time frame to an inattentive audience, there's also the argument of, does anyone care about perfection when you can do things so fast and cheap? And yet, the problem with fast and cheap is that it's often a race to the bottom. And the lack of copyright protection, the potential for future liability, and the honest-to-goodness problem that AI tends to look more and more like slop to everyday people the more exposed they are to it, are all reasons to be cautious about using AI for advertising. We'll see where the court cases take us and how the rules change over time, and chances are pretty good we're still going to be discussing monkeys as we consider the role of AI in media production. But until then, I appreciate the folks who are exploring this and doing cool things with it, like our studio here in St. Louis. But you know what? For me, I'm going to lead by example, and I'm going to keep producing my own content like this show on my own with 100% human production. And as always, thanks to the very real Holly and Trish and all of our awesome marketing mentors as well for making this show happen. And you all, humans in the audience. I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this has been the Marketing Gateway. See you next time. Whew. It's going to be a hot summer, folks, and this month's plug is to help out those who are struggling to beat the heat with indoor air conditioning, either because they can't afford to buy an AC or they can't afford the energy costs of running one. So I'm going to encourage you to donate to a group called Heat Up St. Louis to help them. I know, it sounds crazy, right? But that's because Heat Up St. Louis was originally founded to help people during the winter with their utility bills and to ensure that people are using safe methods of staying warm to reduce the potential for fires. So they also use the brand names Cool Down St. Louis and Cool Down Missouri in their mission to help people as well during the hot summer months. You can donate to them by visiting heatupstlouis.org or check out other ways to donate to them or even volunteer to help them out.